Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to day 3 of Known. How exciting. It is so great to see you all here. And a huge welcome to you guys on the live stream. How amazing that you can be with us as well. So I am Lily. I'm a second year at St. Anne's, and I am honored to be one of your hosts for the lunchtime talks this week. I've been doing like 3 random facts about me every day, so today is no different. I have, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so my staple sort of items of clothing, if I want to like wear an outfit, is headband and earrings. I just absolutely love. I have such an enormous collection of both. Also, I've realized I've gone for a sort of, on Wednesdays we wear pink kind of look today. Intentional or not, who knows? And then another random thing, I prefer movies to TV shows. Don't know whether that's particularly controversial, don't know if some of you agree, but I really like a good movie. And then the final thing, and this is quite good timing for me, I am a huge Manchester City fan. And now before you groan, I am not a glory hunter. I had absolutely no free will in the choice. I was indoctrinated from birth. You can blame my dad, but I'm in a good mood, obviously, after the match yesterday. But anyway, on to way more important things. Whatever brought you here today, whether it's the intrigue of the talk topics, an excited friend, or the promise of G&D's ice cream, you're in for an absolute treat. The way it's going to work is we have a talk from the wonderful Kaz Dodds, and then straight afterwards we'll go into Q&A. Which would be amazing. Also, just to say, you are welcome to slip out at any point. If you have commitments that you need to get to, don't worry, just pop out. But we will aim to be finished at 2. Now, onto this Q&A. We have a really cool, like, Slido vibe thing. That's the one. So scan that or go to the website, take photos, and you can send questions throughout the talk. And it's completely anonymous, so whatever pops into your head, feel free to send it in, and we will discuss some of those in the Q&A with Kaz at the end. Now, just before we get on to the really good stuff, unfortunately, coronavirus is still a thing. So for those of you guys in the building, please keep your mask on during the whole event, and then at the end, stay in your seats until the ushers will sort of guide you out and show you how to leave, basically. So yeah, Kaz, if you'd like to come up to the stage. Hello. Great start. Yeah, well, I was going to say, throughout this past week, I've been asking Kaz some random questions on things that I'm very opinionated on. Turns out, Kaz is wonderfully, like, in the middle of lots of these things. Doesn't have strong opinions, very sort of...
I do have strong opinions on certain things.
I need to find out these.
In my defense, I just sort of reserve the strength of feeling for things that I think matter.
Fair
Scones do not fit on that list, I'm afraid.
That comes. Anyway, so my questions for you today, similar to the facts I gave, do you have any staple items of clothing that form your favorite outfits or anything?
Similarly, I enjoy a hoop earring, but you can't wear them with these mics because we live in a man's world. So the hoop earrings are gone. A denim jacket is my kind of staple, I would say. Yeah. Exactly, can't go wrong unless you've got denims underneath. I've not yet felt that I can double up my up and down like yourself, but I should be bolder. So awesome. Thank you for that inspiration.
And the other question, what did I say?
Football team, Man City.
Movies or TV shows?
Movies or TV shows, yeah, I'm not going to dignify that with a response. They're both good, but they're for different times.
It's very wise, very wise. And a football team, do you support a football team?
Yeah, again, dangerous to some people might not. Well, I'm safe here. Nobody here supports Celtic, so I was brought up supporting Rangers. That was kind of, the team that I inherited. Meant I had a kind of distaste for the colour green all my life, sadly, which I'm gradually getting over. My college colour when I went to university was green, which was a challenge, but I got over it.
You made it here today.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your college colour at uni. Tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you...
Sure, yep. So I live in Edinburgh. What shall I say about myself? I am married to Kieran, who works as a photojournalist. And I've got twins, Ada and Izzy, who are 4. I work a few years ago. I've done a few careers, and I had a career change a few years ago and started the civil service fast stream, so I now work in the civil service, but I'm on holiday this week. I very much enjoy kind of discussing these kind of big life questions and hearing what other people have to say about them as well, so it's lovely to be here. That's me.
Awesome. So Cass has a brilliant talk lined up for us today, and I'm going to let you get straight on.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lily. As I come over, let me just kind of invite you again to get the swiftpolling.com whatever up. It might be that questions kind of come to you throughout the talk, so feel free just to fire them in as I'm speaking. Otherwise, all the questions will kind of be kind of based on what I say last, which might be interesting, but it might also be interesting to get some of the other kind of questions that come to you just as I'm speaking. So I'm going to look at this question, what would it take to feel connected? Because if ever there was a year that kind of typified our sense of any isolation that we feel, it was last year, wasn't it? It was 2020. And unfortunately, it seems to be seeping into 2021 as well. We kind of got a whole new vocabulary around the idea of needing to be alone or apart from other people, distant from them. Isolation, social distancing. In Scotland, we tried to soften that to physical distancing. Quarantine. Much of life just now is all about who we're not allowed to see, or how many people we are allowed to see, or what we're allowed to do when we are with them. Because of a virus which thrives off human contact. I saw a poster on a bus stop on a grey January day that really stood out to me, and it said, "Don't help spread the virus." I think I've got a picture of it. "Don't help spread the virus." And it said underneath that, "COVID-19 thrives on human contact." The thing is, we thrive on human contact, don't we? For most of us, the defining problem of the last year has been that the distance between ourselves and those that we love. This poem by an A-level student on their teacher's Twitter account summed up so much for me. I think it's totally beautiful. A 17-year-old called Lynette Drury wrote this. They write, "When all this is over, I am planning to meet you in a coffee shop where I'll lean way back like a free man and hold my cup in the air as if inspecting a jewel. I'm hoping for rain so hard we can't tell what are stars and which are raindrops, so hard we have to stand under the same black bat-like umbrella, looking at the halo round the street lamp will remind me of how I used to be scared of the dusk sky. I'll tell you this, quietly, as you'll be close enough to hear me. Where were you during the total eclipse, I'll ask. By the time this is over, it'll be winter. High time for ice skating. We'll make music stave tracks behind us, and when I trip, you'll be allowed to reach out and catch me. Don't we all sometimes need caught? Hasn't this year been harder because no one's been able to? Because relationships are where we thrive. We can have everything that we biologically need, but if we don't have quality relationships, then we're not really ourselves. Lots of studies have borne that out. The well-known Harvard study of adult development concludes this: the clearest message that we get from this 75-year study is this: good relationships keep us healthier and happier, period. Apparently, people are 30% more likely to die earlier. Lonely people are 30% more likely to die earlier than less lonely people, with loneliness being a risk factor for heart problems, stroke, dementia, depression, anxiety. It's as if connecting with others is part of what we're designed for. And yet, even before COVID-19, most of us feel, at least sometimes, very alone. Studies suggest that somewhere between 30 and 50% of people in Britain feel lonely. That's been led to Britain being termed the loneliness capital of Europe. It's incredible, isn't it, that sometimes we can be surrounded by people. That was one of my real memories of my first year of university, actually, that I was surrounded by people. I had so much social contact, actually, very different to the time that we're finding ourselves in just now. And yet I remember sitting in my room and thinking, I don't know that anybody really understands me. There can be lots of reasons for that sense. It could be that you feel misunderstood like me. It could be that romantic relationships perhaps feel painful and full of uncertainty. Sometimes our backgrounds make us feel a bit of a disconnect, I think, from other people. Perhaps we're afraid to show a certain part of our history or of ourselves. Even if you're not someone who's very aware of that kind of sense of loneliness, it might be that this year you have faced what really is the greatest loneliness, the greatest disconnect, and that is the death of someone that you love. Nothing reminds us more of our disconnection with one another than the death of a loved one, where that disconnect is permanent and irreparable. So whether it's that severe grief and loneliness or just the day-to-day sense of being alone, I think we're very aware of our deep need for connection, and yet we also find it elusive. We don't ever feel totally satisfied with the relationships that we have. And so I want to pose the question, where does that sense come from? Faye Bound-Alberti is a cultural historian. She's written a really beautiful book called A Biography of Loneliness. And she points to the decline of Christianity as a source of the rise of loneliness. She compares fascinating experiences of loneliness from Sylvia Plath in the 60s to Queen Victoria, a century before. And she says this, with the decline of religion, I'll quote one bit and then this bit on the screen. So she says, with the decline of religion, or more specifically the emergence of rational humanism, secularity was crucial to the modern formation of loneliness as an emotional cluster. And she goes on, as it's on the screens, in the absence of an all-knowing, benevolent father and the persistent spread of a competitive individualism, a vacuum had emerged in which the self was alone, marooned, and dependent on familial and social networks that were, by reason of these global changes, in a state of flux. Wonder then, could it be that something of our kind of modern experience of loneliness that's been compounded by COVID-19, but that pre-exists it, has roots in our cultural move away from Christianity, our secularization? I grew up absolutely assuming that Christianity was a fairy tale, that it was something that people who were too fragile to face the world as it really was believed, that it was kind of a comfort to them. That was my assumption growing up. But I became increasingly aware, I think, that the things that Christians seemed needy of weren't sort of weaknesses in themselves, deficiencies in them, but instead were kind of realities of the human experience. It seemed to me, actually, perhaps Christians had faced up to the world as it really was. That one of the things that we all feel is that disconnect, that weight of aloneness. It seemed to me odd that from, say, a purely biological evolutionary perspective, I should have a desire that just couldn't be fulfilled by the other material bodies around me. And so, reading an account of Jesus' life, where he spoke of humanity's deep need for relationship, was totally transformative to me. Because Jesus says that real, lasting, eternal life is not just life that goes on forever, it is a relationship. That the very heartbeat of our existence is relationships. And one particular relationship, a relationship with God. And in case that all sounds kind of too airy-fairy and not kind of tangible enough, Jesus, in the accounts of his life, lay out examples of what that relationship is like. What's it like to be known by God, to be in a relationship with him? I want to look briefly at one of those sections of John's account. There's these on your kind of chairs. It would help if you had a look at those for yourself. I'm just going to read a few sentences from the very start. We've been looking at different sections of this book throughout this week. And I don't think we've actually looked at the first few sentences, the first page or so. So I thought it'd be interesting just to look at chapter 1, which is found on page 4 of these little books. It'll come up on the screens as well. And I'm going to start reading at the little number 9 and finish at 14. So I'll read this bit, and I wonder, in amongst these kind of enormous, kind of philosophical, huge ideas, I think there's a description. Jesus makes a description of what it means to be known by God. So I'm just going to read from the number 9. And John writes this: "The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, or of a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." Did you see that? Jesus says that being known by God is being his child, knowing God as a father. You might think, well, how could Jesus offer that? Well, because Jesus is God's Son, who's come to give that status to others, to extend that loving kindness of God. A relationship of intimacy, of love, of dependency, of security. I mentioned that I've got 2 wee girls, and when I had them, I remember thinking, I think I thought prior to having them that I had a kind of symmetrical relationship with my parents. They loved me, I loved them. There was a kind of balance that I thought existed. And it wasn't until I had the twins that I thought, I remember saying to my mum, I didn't know you felt like this about me. I didn't know the kind of, the cavernous extent of the love that you feel. And now I understand why you want to know when I'm going to be back in, who I'm hanging out with, what my hopes and my fears are, what I'm doing with my life. I understood then we didn't have a symmetrical relationship, actually. The kind of weight of love that I felt for these 2 new people kind of completely outweighed anything I'd experienced before. And of course, not all of us have experienced parents like that, have we? Not all of us have felt that kind of love. And if that's the case, then probably you will know all the more how essential and wonderful a real relationship like that would be. I was reading a book by this woman, Jackie Hill Perry, recently, an American author and poet, and she describes this experience, I think, of a bad relationship with a parent really powerfully and beautifully. So I'm just going to read out a little section from her book where she's writing about her relationship with her father. And she says this: "I enjoyed every minute with this inconsistent relative I called Daddy until he started using words I didn't believe belonged to him, like 'I love you.' That sentence was too big to fit in his mouth. He even spit it out like he believed it when he said it, but I didn't. I couldn't. Love, as I'd understood it through my mama, wasn't like the wind. Indifference was like that. Wind and indifference went wherever it pleased, settling down when it benefited from them, moving on without warning, even if it ripped a home or 2 apart on the way out. Love was like the sun, always there. It might have looked like it was moving, but it was forever still. Daddy couldn't stay put, so as far as I was concerned, Daddy didn't love me." The kind of love that God the Father has for you is like the sun, not like the wind. It's not dependent on where he is, whether or not he's looking, whether he's noticed you, whether he's got other things to do, or on how well you're performing. We so often think about whether or not we're loved about like that, don't we? Am I good enough? Have I got the grades? Do I look good enough? Am I lovely enough? That's totally not like the way that God loves. And there's other pictures, if you read this account for yourself, kind of fleshing out a bit of what a relationship, what it looks like to be known by God. That not just like a child with a father, but also like a husband with a wife. or like friends, or like sheep with a shepherd, branches to a vine. All pictures of demonstrating what Jesus primarily came to do, to restore a relationship, to restore your relationship with God. So what if we didn't have to be alone? What if we'd been kind of sold a lie about individualism in our society? What if our sense that a romantic relationship or a friendship would complete us, what if that's because there is a greater relationship on offer that really will? So where we've come to so far, let me take a pause. I've said that we have, I think, this deep sense of a need for a relationship that we don't find satisfaction for, and yet that is what's on offer in Christianity. Now, if you're anything like me, then I think there might be two different senses in which you're thinking, well, that is too good to be true. So let me briefly address those. One is, I think you might be saying, well, that just sounds too good to be true. I think that's just wishful thinking. A worldview which includes something like life after death might seem to you like the ultimate in kind of fanciful, wishful thinking. It was Freud who said that religion is the process of unconscious wish fulfillment. To this, I would simply say that I think there is a great deal more evidence for Christianity than for Freud's theory. Christianity doesn't claim to be the kind of thing that is just justified on my need for it or my desire for it. The Bible doesn't advocate for that kind of faith. In fact, accounts like this one were written precisely to be able to provide some evidence. The sentences that we read, I think, speak to that, writing about Jesus coming in the flesh, writes in a kind of historical, tangible way. God isn't some philosophical idea. No, he came in history in the flesh. The resurrection isn't some kind of pie-in-the-sky, imaginary, once upon a time in a land far away kind of fairy tale. No, it's earthy, historical, gory, sensory. John's account talks about blood and the smell and the surprise and the joy, a joy that changes everything. The cross and the resurrection of Jesus proclaims that death hasn't won, that you are loved, and that you don't have to be alone. And so to write it off because it sounds too good, well, I think that speaks to the fact that we've been in 2020 too long. We're used to being disappointed. I said there were two reasons that you might be thinking this is too good to be true, and the second is this. I'm sure that some of you will be thinking, I couldn't possibly be truly known and truly loved. I think there are lots of us who feel so weighed down by shame that we think it utterly incredible that we could be known and loved. Every bit of ourselves, our histories, our dreams, our fears, our pasts, that all of those things could be known and yet we could be accepted and loved totally. Others are born with the kind of effortless self-confidence that will make this seem strange. I know. I'm even prepared to believe that in the University of Oxford, those people exist. And yet, for lots of us, we walk around trying to hide bits of ourselves all the time. I've got a friend who applied 2 years in a row to come to Oxford. She didn't get in the first year, applied again, and came. And at her wedding, well, a kind of essential bit of knowledge to kind of explain this story is that in Scotland, the way that we show affection to one another is primarily by kind of slagging one another off, kind of undermining one another, that sort of thing. It's hugely dysfunctional and toxic, but nonetheless, that is kind of Scottish culture. And so at this person's wedding, her dad made big jokes about her determination and her perseverance that were evidenced by her not taking rejection from Oxford and instead applying again and getting in again. And that was totally devastating to her because none of her Oxford friends who were at the wedding knew that bit of her application history. We hide all sorts of silly things about ourselves, don't we? Because of the fear that we think, I won't be loved if people know that about me. But God's love for you doesn't depend on what you do. It depends on his love for his Son, and that is unbreakable. That is the life-changing thing for you to know, that Jesus didn't just come in the flesh full of truth for you to be confident in God's existence and his reality and his presence. No, what we read was that he came full of grace and truth. And grace is undeserved love. Even though we don't deserve it, we're given it. You see that as you read through this account for yourself, that Jesus draws close to people who are full of that kind of shame I described. And not just drawn close to them, but he gave the ultimate sacrifice to restore their relationship with God. He gave his own life to secure their relationship with God. And his rising from the dead is the proof that that will last even through death. God came from heaven to seek and to find you. The author that I quoted earlier, her experience of a rubbish dad, she describes the overwhelming joy of being found by Jesus and of understanding what it is to be loved by him. She writes this: God in Christ came from heaven for me, of all people. Who gave mercy my address or told it how to get into my room? Didn't he know a sinner lived in it? And then I remembered the one verse of the Bible that I knew by heart. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. You are never too far away to be caught by that kind of love. I'm going to wrap up now because I want to have enough time for some Q&A. So I just want to leave you with this thought and discuss some of the ways you might want to respond. What if we have been sold a lie by our culture's pursuit of individualism? What if we weren't made to be alone and in fact we didn't have to be? And if that kind of connection was on offer, then I would say that the kind of most sensible thing in the world would be to explore it, wouldn't it? The best way, I think, to do that is to read the source documents yourself. I think you'll be interested and surprised to see just how many familiar ideas there are in there, how much our language and our culture has been shaped by these ideas. It would make a great book for a book discussion. So I would encourage you just to read that for yourself, to discuss it with others, perhaps to go to a church where you'll hear it taught. Some of you might want to do more than that and to start a relationship with God. You might want to say a prayer like the one that's up on the screens at the moment. Something like, Father God, sorry for ignoring you, trying to do things on my own. Thank you for sending Jesus so that I can be adopted as your child. Help me to receive your love and to live with you as my Father. You might want to echo that prayer. Or it might be, more likely, lots of you will have lots of questions still. So I want to move to that. And as I invite Lily up, let me just give a quick pitch for the talks that are happening tomorrow. I'm going to be addressing the question of pain and suffering from a Christian perspective. The title is there meaning in our pain? And on Friday, I'll be looking at the resurrection through the lens of can our desires be fulfilled? So I'd love you to come back for those as well. But let me hand over to Lily, see what questions we have.
Thank you so much. That was incredible. What an amazing offer. We've got some brilliant questions from the Slido so far, everyone. Do keep sending them in if any others pop into your mind. To start off with, we have one which is, what if I do feel satisfied with where I am in my relationships? Why should I still look to Christianity?
Yeah, very good question. What if you do feel satisfied? And the first thing I would say to that is, fantastic. There's not, I would say, that isn't kind of a universal or even a normative experience. So I would say that's wonderful that you've got such kind of quality, good relationships. I would say that I still think a lot of your well-being is probably determined by the relationships that you have and the quality of relationships that you have. And I would say that that speaks to the truth of a worldview that says that relationship is at the heart of who we are. I don't necessarily think that that kind of conclusion springs from other ways of viewing the world. For example, a purely atheistic, naturalistic way of viewing the world, I think might lead us to be quite surprised that relationships are actually what define our sense of kind of well-being. So that's the first thing that I would say. The second thing is I would encourage you to store up some of these things, because I would say that most of us throughout life experience things that do leave us feeling in some way disconnected or alone. And so I hope that some of these things might stay with you and resonate perhaps at a different time. The third thing that I would say, and the final thing, is before a fourth comes to me, I'll commit to this being the final. The third thing I would say is that I wouldn't want you to think that what I've said today is the kind of primary evidence for Christianity. I think there's lots of, good reasons for believing in Christianity. That this is one that I think is particularly resonant for our culture at the moment, but that there are lots of other things that convince me of Christianity's truthfulness. So I don't want you to leave thinking, well, I don't have that particular issue, and so therefore Christianity has no relevance to me. I think that it does for the reasons that I've said, but I also think that there's lots of other things that speak to both the kind of experiential goodness of Christianity, but also its truth, its objective truth outside of me. So I hope those things are helpful.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. Another brilliant question. How can we be sure we're fully known by someone we don't fully know?
How can we be sure we're fully known by someone we don't fully know?
I'm assuming referring to God, because we can't fully know him.
Okay, yeah. What an interesting and good question. I think I would probably want to say that we can know God, that a relationship with God is absolutely a two-way thing. That when, I spoke about this yesterday, that I think there is a kind of sense in which when I read the Bible, I feel like a mirror is being held back to me, that I can see that God does know me. And that's because he is the creator who made me. The Bible describes that in very kind of like personal terms often, that God knows every hair in our head, sometimes something that's so commonly said in our kind of culture, isn't it? Something that comes from the Bible. So I would say that as I read the Bible, I get this sense of, oh gosh, he really knows me. And that I can absolutely know him. So that isn't just a one-way thing, it's a two-way thing. That he has shown himself in history, in time and in space. God hasn't stayed distant, but he's come in the person of Jesus. That he's shown what he's like. He's shown his character. He's shown his goodness, his holiness, his love, his kindness, his justice. So I would say that we can know God because he's made himself known in the person of Jesus. How do I access that now? Well, it's through his words, through reading his words. And so I don't think it is a kind of one-way thing. I think there is very much a two-way relationship. There's probably more to be said about that, about what it's like to know someone who isn't physically in the room. Jesus isn't here, so I'd happily speak to that as well. But if that's a question, ask it, send it in. But for now, should we have another question?
Yeah. We have. How can I start to trust in a Heavenly Father when I've been hurt by my earthly one?
Yeah, a very good question, and I suppose I would commend that book to you as well by Jackie Hill Perry, who writes so powerfully about that kind of relationship that she had with her dad, and then the kind of utter difference in the relationship that she has with God. I think I would want to say that some of these things will take lots of time and lots of healing, but that one of the beautiful things about Christianity is God's character, what he's like. And so many aspects of his character are ways in which we want to mirror. So as a mum, I want to mirror something of what God is like, as a parent to us. I want to mirror something of like that to my kids, but I just won't do it perfectly. And that kind of points to, I think, our need for a Heavenly Father who is utterly perfect, who doesn't let us down, whose love is like the sun. And coming to trust him will take time, and for lots of us, there will be lots of barriers that will stop us trusting him. But as we see more and more of what he's like, we see more and more of his goodness, of his trustworthiness, of his steadfastness, of the fact that he will never walk out on us, all of those sorts of things. And I suppose I would want to say that kind of pain that we experience from the kind of bad love, or the love gone wrong, or the absent love, all the more shows the weight and the beauty and the goodness of a Father whose love is absolutely steadfast.
Thank you. A quick question from the Slido as well. What is the book by Jackie Hill Perry called?
It is called Gay Girl, Good God. It's her kind of personal testimony story. Gay Girl, Good God. I think I've got that right. Someone nod. Yeah.
Fab. Thank you. A brilliant question. How can I build a connection with God?
How can I build a connection with God? Good question. I would say start as I said, I would start by reading the accounts of Jesus' life, like the one that the Christian Union are giving out this week. I think that's kind of a great place to start in terms of seeing what God is like and how he's shown himself in the person of Jesus. I would also say, why not try praying? Why not pray that prayer that I suggested, asking God to help you to hear his voice, and to open what he says is his voice, open his words, so that we hear Jesus speaking. I'd also really encourage you, if you want to know God more and build a connection, to meet with other people. So when, in part of this account of Jesus' life, in chapter 16, Jesus addresses the question of when he knows that he's going to go. And so his followers say, well, what are we going to do about that? That doesn't sound good. How I can hear the resonance of that kind of question of, well, how can we know God when he goes? And he says a number of things, one of which is that he will give you his Spirit to help you to know him, to hear his voice, to be assured of his love for you. Another is that he says, love one another. So he starts this community of love, a family known as the church today. And so I'd really encourage you to meet with other people who know God, that we were never supposed to. There's a danger, I think, that we kind of encourage this kind of individualism in the Christian world, where we say that to be known by God is just an individual thing. It's not. It's always supposed to be a family thing. And so I'd really encourage you to go to a church where someone else will be speaking to the Bible and helping us understand it, and as well where we can be part of a community where we see that lived out. We see what it's like to live in a relationship with God. So they would be my starting points for that.
Fab. I'm afraid we'll have to draw the Q&A bit to a close in the spirit of timekeeping. But Kaz will be around after this, and I know she is super happy to chat to you guys if your questions haven't been answered yet, because we've got some great ones. And if you maybe have more questions that have just been brought up from this discussion. So yeah, do grab her and ask about what this relationship might look like, and maybe ask the people you came with, ask the team, the known team who will be around wearing lanyards. Everyone will be really happy to have those discussions. And Known continues for the rest of this week. We're now halfway through, but we've still got talks tonight and tomorrow and Friday. And a little flavour for tonight. Kaz mentioned her talks that are coming up, but tonight we have Imagine a World Where No One Was Afraid. And that sounds pretty incredible. And tomorrow, Kaz's talk is There Meaning in Our Pain? That's big. I'm very excited to hear those. And then beyond this week, Known kind of continues with this thing that OICCU runs called The Search, and you're about to get a little promo video right now. Incredible stuff. Yeah, amazing. So the search currently is happening in people's gardens every Monday and Tuesday in small groups. And there's sort of hot chocolates, marshmallows, fire pit, just an absolutely dreamy setup in my opinion. But from the 17th, it will be resuming at the top of Costa with free coffee and cake, so amazing. And you can come along either in person or online, so everyone can come, which is hugely exciting. And I'd really encourage you to check it out. And it's super easy to get involved and get updates. All you have to do is text search to 88802, and you'll receive specifics every week. So maybe I'll give you a moment to do that. You never know, one week it might just spark your interest and you think, you know what, I do fancy a free coffee and a free cake tonight, so pop along. And yeah, so while you're doing that, just a thank you to the wonderful team of people behind the scenes who've done incredible stuff, and the tech team. You guys are amazing. But yeah, that brings us to the end of the event today. I hope you've enjoyed it, and please do grab people to discuss. And if you're watching the live stream, oh my word, I'm thinking about ice cream, you can tell. If you're watching the live stream, do have a Zoom call with a friend if you're not already on one, and keep these conversations flowing, and maybe enjoy an ice cream while you chat. See you later.